Good evening. You're on the smoking section, and I'm very happy tonight to have Ken Thomas on with me. Ken, welcome to the smoking section.
Very much thank you, Steve.
And
Thank you.
You're welcome, and thank you for showing up early. Not as early as you had planned, but earlier than some of my guests,
You're welcome.
who show up sometimes after the show starts, which isn't good, but better late than never. Ken and I have met at Cambridge Public Library, and we've discussed an issue. And as I was saying to Ken, this program is pretty much devoted to tobacco issues.
Mm-hmm.
And we were both agreeing that if one is going to be active in politics, one has to kind of limit one's activism. Would you agree with that?
Yes, one would have to prioritize. That would make one a little bit more effective.
And it's awfully hard to be effective at all, one person. I
Yes.
think.
But one always has oneself to start out with.
Yes, yes, indeed. And so I am going to break from the custom of this program, and we are going to talk about an issue. And Ken, what is that issue that you and I have talked a lot about?
We've talked about men's rights in the context of misandry.
And, you know, most people don't even know what misandry means.
Yes, that's true.
Can you explain it to us?
I believe that misandry means a discrimination against men. A discrimination and it's hard for me to remember the exact. Even though I write it down frequently, it's hard for me to remember the exact definition without looking it up. As a matter of fact, I have it written down, so I refer to it. Misandry, a noun. Dislike or contempt for or ingrained prejudice against men, i.e. the male sex.
Well, you know, that seems to be very, very pronounced these days.
If one is aware of it and paying attention to it. If one is a little bit less, one will more frequently, if not exclusively, hear the word misogyny and hear references to misogyny. So given that that's the word being used somewhat ubiquitously in the social sphere, one's attention can be aimed in that direction by the use of that word. And since the word misandry is used so infrequently, one's attention might not be on the phenomena as it's happening in one's experience.
Because we hear misogyny all the time. I mean, it seems every day I hear that word once or twice or thrice.
Yes, likewise, for me.
And it seems as if the definition of misogyny is, it seems if it's so broad that, anything one does, if you go into a bar and you ask a young woman or a middle-aged woman or an older woman, if you try to talk to her, that's like inappropriate or misogynistic, or do you get that impression that the word is so broad now?
I feel at fault for not having written a definition for misogyny like I've written for misandry, so that I can read it out quickly and answer that question with more clarity.
But have you ever been accused of misogyny?
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can. Shall I?
Please.
Should I name? I can a journal, so I can go into a lot of detail.
Well, we have 27 minutes, and I'm all ears, and I'm sure my audience is.
I found myself at a Starbucks restaurant, a Starbucks coffee shop, and a woman who was directly in front of me, like the TV monitors directly in front of me, approximately 10 feet or so, was sitting at a table adjacent to me. And she stood up in a very tight pant kind of clothing.
Yes.
Like yoga pants.
Yeah.
And as she stood up, and I've seen this happen a lot of times because I journal, and I pay attention to the behaviors that people exhibit in front of me, and I kind of anticipated that she might do this. So she stood up, and she stood so that I could see her profile. And as her profile was directly in front of me, and she was a curvy young woman.
Yes.
I may be accused of misogyny for saying these things. I
Well,
don't know.
thus far, I certainly don't think there's anybody who could accuse you of misogyny for what you've just said on this program.
Okay. So she had a very curvy body, in my opinion, very fit young woman.
The hard body babe, if you will.
Yes, sure enough. And then as she stood there and seemed to pause, as she, I think, anticipated that my gaze was in her direction, she decided to use her right hand to reach back and stroke the curve of her rear end
Yes.
several times.
Interesting.
And so as she did that, I thought, that's quite a display. And
Yes.
I thought that it warranted a comment from me.
Uh-oh.
And so I commented, nice butt.
Oh my gosh, you said that really? Well, I mean, okay, that's cool. Yes, could continue.
And after having done so, I shared a table with two young men.
Right.
One sitting across from me, facing me, and one sitting beside me, facing in the same direction that I was facing. The one sitting across from me immediately looked up and said to me, "What did you say?" in a
Yes.
very authoritative, accusational tone of voice.
This was one of the fellows you were sitting next to, or
Yes.
across from you at
Yes.
the table, at the booth, I guess.
It was a table.
Yes.
And I said to him, "What did you hear me say?" And he said, "No, no, 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 no. Tell me, what did you say?"
Right.
And I repeated, "What did you hear me say?" Because my inferences were that he was going to condescend to me.
Yes.
And sure enough, he started into a tirade on me
Right.
about my my misogynistic behavior.
Right.
How foul it was,
Oh my gosh.
how I should be removed from the streets, I should be imprisoned. He listed a whole number of things that should happen to me
Right.
for having made that comment.
Yes, I understand. Now, how well did you know, or do you know this fellow with whom you were sitting? Or is this someone you didn't know?
It was someone that I don't believe I've ever seen before
Right.
or ever had a conversation with before.
So you simply happen to be sharing or be at a table near somebody.
Yes,
So you were accused by a male rather
yes,
than a female.
yes.
And did you lose your temper?
No, but I did become irritated by him saying that, in the sense that it was a social setting that was pretty heavily populated. There was a lot of people there
Right.
who were listening or potentially listening to what was being said, and given that it was typically kind of quiet there before this exchange happened between me, I thought that what we were saying to one another would be easily heard by people nearby.
The conversation you were having with this fellow.
Yes.
And how did it resolve?
I said to him that, eventually I reiterated to him what I had seen. I said that this woman stood up in these very tight
right.
pants.
Yes.
She profiled there for a while. And I said to him, she behaved in what I thought was a very salacious way.
Yes. Now, did she at all evince any kind of discomfort or anything of that sort?
No,
But did she hear what you said to her?
We were talking as loud as me and you were talking. Me and this other fellow.
But when you said nice butt to her,
yes.
did she hear it?
I suspect she did, but she didn't behave in any way that caught my attention.
She didn't call the police?
No.
Well,
I don't think that's a criminal offense.
no, I certainly don't think so. But these days, almost anything a man does can be a criminal offense when it comes to anything in the exchange of, well, I mean, for example, if you make what's called an unwanted sexual overture to somebody,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's not criminal, but you could get in trouble at work.
Okay, yeah.
But the point is, you never know it's unwanted until you've made it, right?
I don't completely agree, in the sense that I think that people build up anticipatory understandings of what's socially acceptable or not, and that's all happening in a range of uncertainties. But one can be on target to some extent with some of these anticipations.
But it's certainly in the relationship between the sexes. and romance and love and sexual flirtation, all of these things, these are very complicated things that are sometimes very difficult to understand and know and anticipate.
I completely agree. Because I journal and I might think about these things, thinking about these things and journaling about these things would compel me to probe and intentionally ask questions, make comments to try to discern how people feel about this comment. What language is acceptable under what circumstances and such.
Well, I mean, here's an example that I think is an outrageous example, but when Tiger Woods I think we discussed this or we mentioned this.
Yes.
I mean, from what I understand, his wife was attacking him with a golf club, which is, of course, a lethal weapon.
Potentially.
Yeah, well, yes, definitely potentially. And from what I gather, I don't know the details, she was not charged with any crime whatsoever.
From what I recall from me reading about it and what attention I gave to it, I don't believe that she was either charged with any.
Yet he all of a sudden got in a lot of trouble because evidently he had carried on with many affairs with many women.
Yes.
So he was kind of, what was the word, demonized.
Yes.
I mean, I think that was very unfair.
And as you say, her behavior, which was criminal, a criminal act, was done with impunity.
Ignored.
Even though it was publicly announced that she had done it.
Right.
I'm not sure if she admitted to it.
Well, I mean, I think it was common knowledge, common sense, and so forth, and things like that. And he was vilified. I mean, I don't think he probably acted like a good husband should act. In fact, I'm sure he didn't. But what about all these women who seemed to want to have sex with him? I mean, no one was critical of them, right?
As far as I understand, no.
And I think that's a very egregious example.
I'd agree.
Now,
and I find it common. It's so common that it seems normal and acceptable. Nevertheless, it is misandry.
and why is it, do you have any ideas why our society seems to be so hell-bent on lowering the status of men and raising the status of women?
Good question. I mean, it's easy for me to veer into more political issues. I mean, there's a disposable population. So one can generate a disposable population by this means, as a guess I would hazard.
Well, elaborate a little bit when you say disposable population.
So I get the impression sometimes that there are some capitalist interests who would look for workers at the lowest price available, workers who are capable of doing some activity for some job, and they would like to get these workers to perform these activities at the lowest price possible. So if they're more marginalized, then they're more able to gain large populations of people who are marginalized at low prices.
You think that there is some kind of capitalistic motive to this?
For exploitation, yes.
But you don't think, I find that to be simplistic. I mean,
Okay. But that's
I
my
think
first
it's
attempt
a hazard.
to answer
You're
your
hazarding
question.
a guess. You're hazarding a guess.
Yes.
And how does it make more people disposable and work for less money? The fact that so many opportunities are being presented to women, and so many opportunities are being denied to men.
Well, if there's a portion of the population that can be disparaged, and that disparagement can be acknowledged in a group and accepted in a group kind of way, then their value in the society is lowered.
So men will work for less money.
Yes.
That's an interesting idea, and I suppose in a capitalist society, one is always, or the society itself is always looking for low paid labor.
Yes.
Well,
So that's my tact, my initial tact, attempt to answer your question. Why might this be going on?
Do you think, in terms of child custody and that area, there has been any improvement in terms of the courts dealing with men and women, giving men custody, let's say, more often than they heretofore had?
Maybe in the past 18 months, 2 years, there's been some movement in that direction, and my belief that that's the case is purely by inference. I don't have a lot of details, statistics that were collected in a very rigorous way that proves that or confirms that.
But you think there may have been some changes for the better?
In full disclosure, the mother of my son took off with him when he was 2 months old.
Yeah.
I didn't see him again until he was 26 years old. I didn't know whether he was alive or dead for 24 years of those 26 years.
Oh my gosh.
And because I journaled before he was conceived that I intentionally wanted to father and parent healthy offspring, I shared that with his mother. I was very disturbed, emotionally, psychologically disturbed by her taking off with the child. And so I've done a lot of agitating for the past 26 years as a man about fatherhood, parenthood, and these things. And I'm hoping that me and other men who've been in similar positions, and some women who'd like more fairness in parenting, would also weigh in on this problem and try to make some changes.
Have you been able to establish contact with your son?
Yeah, I was able to go and meet him 2 years ago, and we spent a day together.
And do you see that as a start?
Of course, sure. Just finding his image on the internet and finding out that he seemed to be well. He was playing basketball in some sort of tournament, and so I saw him there, and he seemed to be well. So that was a bit of a relief. And then to actually see him and embrace him, to sit across from him, eat a meal, to watch him gaze around and see that interaction, to hear his voice was it was very reassuring.
And is he a chip off the old block? Does he resemble you, or does he resemble you physically or in some other way?
He resembles me physically. He does.
What about emotionally? Does he?
I think that 22 hours, 20 hours of interaction is far, far, far too short a time to discern those kinds of things.
Well, as you know, again, we've talked about this before. I was somewhat perturbed that the library is offering a course called Girls Who Code, which is closed to teenagers who identify as male.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, you did share that with me.
And I brought this up with the deputy director of the library, and she told me that she ran it through the legal department and at the city of Cambridge, and they said it was legal, even though my reading of the Cambridge ordinance and the state ordinance, it appears to me, expressly forbids excluding teenagers on the basis of their sex from a course. And do you think this is an act that will have some, I mean, obviously it's not going to change the course of history, but do you think this is worthy pursuing in terms of bringing attention to the misandry that we both feel permeates the society?
I feel at fault for not paying as much attention to these kinds of things as you have. And I really appreciate that you paid attention, that you called my attention to this, and that you're showing an interest in this, and I think it's very important.
So you think I should pursue it?
I do. Not only do I think that you should, I feel at fault for not pursuing it myself more.
Well, I don't know what...
I feel lazy. I feel like I'm, what's the word for it, procrastinating some on my part, because these issues are important to me as well.
Well, you and I both went up to that, or down to that, I should say. For some reason, I always think that Jamaica Plain is up, but it seems up on a hill, but it really is south. It's down. But we went to that, I can't even remember what it was. What did we go to?
Business women's meeting of some
We
sort.
Boss, some kind of program that's run by the city to give opportunities to women to fund and to run their own businesses.
Yes.
And they had a kind of soiree, I guess. And we expected that we might be denied entry.
I didn't expect that.
What did you expect?
I'd expect that 3 men who are full adults show up. There's so much anti-discrimination kinds of wording in the social sphere that they're not going to go against that.
Mm-hmm.
When we show up, when the meeting is primarily or exclusively for women, and we as males show up, they're not going to exclude us.
Bar us entry.
No.
And we actually, I think, found it rather pleasant, didn't we?
We were welcomed. I thought that was, I mean, it's hard to infer what people's deep emotions are.
Yeah.
But I kind of thought that we were welcomed there. There wasn't a great deal of unpleasantness that I was able to see expressed on the women's faces as we sat among them.
No, it didn't seem that way.
And spent some time there.
And I think one of the city councilors came up and spoke to you and Michael O'Brien.
Yes.
Do you remember who she was, what her name is?
I do not.
And what did she seemed to certainly be very welcoming.
Yeah, she was very pleasant.
But
and I anticipated that.
But I'm still disturbed because there are so many men and young men who are in such trouble in our society, who are involved with drugs and violence and who do poorly in school and drop out of school. Why is it do you think it's right that the city of Boston should promote one sex over the other? Meaning, why don't they have entrepreneurs all for men and women?
If it's not causal, it's correlated to the history of the United States, whereby there is this revolution to liberate some people. However, those people who were liberated were white landowning men.
Yes.
And so there's that history. So
Right.
What's currently happening in 2018 is in that context where there are some white males who were empowered by the government, by this movement, this revolutionary movement, to empower a group of people. And this empowerment went on for a century or more, a century plus.
Yeah.
And so there's been this inequitable distribution of power when it comes to land ownership, businesses, finance, and any number of things that people are aware of that has advantaged some white males.
Right, but why? Okay, but that seems to undercut at least my argument that this government's actions to, quote, empower, unquote, women is ignoring so many men and is disadvantaging so many men. And I see it as being very discriminatory.
And I would agree, it's disadvantaging the wrong men. In the sense when the newspapers would report 6 months ago that Jeff Bezos, Warren Buffett, and Bill Gates would have a combined net worth of $250 billion.
Yes, right.
Those are the people who need, in my opinion, economically, politically, need their advantages cut somewhat, or a lot.
Yeah.
And not the advantages of people who are less well educated, less well employable, less economically sound. Those people don't need to be more marginalized. And typically those are the people who are becoming more marginalized as these other people are becoming more wealthy.
Now, recently the Boy Scouts announced that they would start allowing women in, or girls in, so it's no longer going to be the Boy Scouts. I mean, do you think young men need space, I hate to use that word, but I will, where they can be comfortable without girls and go camping and do manly things?
Well, a couple of things. One, there's an organization called the Girl Scouts.
You're right, yes.
There is that. given my character, I want to look at what anthropologists say. Are there evolutionary anthropologists, psychologists, sociologists, a large group of these people who are looking at this problem and looking at the advantages that males have for being among males only, and the advantages to females to be among females only for a particular amount of time in their
Yes.
growth, and setting up structures where that can be nurtured. And when that's the case, I completely agree with that. Sure, when the findings are that there's some advantages to separating the sexes at particular ages for some time over some particular activities, yeah, that's the better thing to do.
Well, evidently the Boy Scouts has decided not to do that, and they want to mix the boys and the girls and the Girl Scouts. But I mean, it seems that there are all kinds of situations where women have their own spaces, but very few spaces are left for men. You know, there are no more pool halls in Boston, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That was a place that men could hang out with other men. Listen, I have to say, it's been great talking. We'll continue this conversation. Thanks for coming on tonight.
You're very welcome. Thank you as well.